My progress is largely chronicled here. Well, I mean, I'll start with, I spent time getting ARVIS satellite working only to find out that there's, I'm not sharing my screen, am I? So, there we go. So do you see the lawn tractor Slack?
Yes.
Matt?
Channel. Yep.
Yeah, so I spent time getting ARVIS satellite installed and running, but then I found out that they've got a bug in it, and so I don't know if I was exactly base link or map link, but either way, I was about 400 feet off of where I was supposed to be. So I'm sure they had a bug, or they had a fix out there, but it wasn't published yet, and I'm sure there's a way to sort of compile it myself, but I didn't spend time doing that. I just went back to ARVIS natively and got this image into my ARVIS, and that worked out pretty well. So, I mean, this is what the satellite image looks like, and I was able to, drive with the joystick out to the end of the drive and turn around, and I've got a bag file of that. But my next challenge is the, let me try to show it on here. So the heading, although the heading is being published, you see how the tractor is pointing, it happens to be easterly. It's about 102 degrees. The tractor goes out this way and turns around and comes back, but the image of the tractor never changes, so it always looks like it's pointing exactly that same direction. So I just literally started looking at the, I mean, if I run the bag file, this is a heading, just echoing the heading, publishing something. I guess that's a quaternion, if I pronounce that correctly. But I can't really tell, looking at a quaternion, what heading that is. So I was going to go back and put some debug statements in the code and try to figure out why the image, whether or not the heading is actually changing in the publishing, or is it a...
Can you echo your ODOM? You were echoing the heading. Can you echo your
Just now
ODOM?
I was echoing the heading, yes. What about ODOM?
And then echo your ODOM.
So here it's on the way back, because I mean, the X is coming down. And it's about stopped. Well, I came a little bit further, it appears. So now it's sitting still. I mean, I could start that over again.
That's weird. It looks like your heading is updating and it's making it into the ODOM message, but it's weird that it's not switching when it should be 180, when you come back.
Well, so I restarted the bag file and it's not really moving yet. But we could watch it go out about 30 meters and come back and see if the X and Y actually changes very much.
Yeah. Oh, that was on the heading. Yeah, something's not right there.
So at this point, I'm basically, right here because I've put a little mark on my driveway to make sure I'm always starting and stopping at the same point, which is, I don't think I've updated the beginning one yet. Come on, I should have figured out what timestamp actually starts moving. Yeah, I'm just standing around drinking coffee about now.
If you feel good about your XY position, then you want to focus on this next part, right?
Well, I mean, although that's a simple question, I can tell you, I mean, I could start ARBIZ, I guess, couldn't I? And it would show it on ARBIZ, would it? But to answer your question, yes, I could see the tractor come out on ARBIZ and come back. And to get this map exactly right, I was moving it by hand just to make sure that this is the end of my driveway. And so, yes, I was able to, get comfortable that, here we go. We're moving out. So you can see what the X and Y is doing on heading. So I'm still headed at about 102 degrees. Dag nabbit.
I wouldn't trust that heading message. That doesn't look right. It just looks like noise. It's not real data.
And so now I'm on my way back, and that, I don't. So I was going to, again, my debug process was going to be put in I think it's GPS ODOM. It actually takes the heading in sort of NEMA format and converts it to quaterny, and I was just going to print it out before it actually converts it as a informational message. Try to see what's going on there. So you can see it's headed back now, and this is still giving you that XW that looks pretty darn similar to what it was when it went out. So anyway, some progress, but that's where I'm personally at. How do I stop sharing? Where's there we go, there's the button. Hey, Jeff.
All right.
So that's what's going on in my world. More testing and trying to figure out whether it's GPS ODOM or GPS. Yeah, that's the GPS ODOM is somehow not publishing it correctly, or if it's further back in the Navsat driver. Any thoughts?
Navsat driver.
Say again.
It looked like when you echoed the heading and when you echoed the odometry, it was giving you the same message. So that would point to the Navsat driver.
Well, maybe I'll put a message or put a start there then with some info messages and see if I can figure out what's going on. Any progress in your world, Matt? Besides recovering?
Recovering this week, big time. And then GPS, starting on the GPS work.
Jeff, anything in your world you want to mention?
Pretty much where I was before. I just, after our last general meeting and people talked about steering, I just need to take those pieces and stick them together. About 10 minutes of hacking on the code. And then I thought I could go back and pull up one of my old files. And it turns out the one that I have that I was showing where I just drive around in a circle. Is it pulled up here? No, I'd have to go track that
Yeah, I
down.
watched the video and you guys were into a heavy math conversation with radians and velocity and curvature. I don't think I understood the difference between, say, radians per second and curvature. Kyler kept talking about publishing curvature, or I don't know if he used the word publishing, but I didn't. The question that came to my head was wonder what the metric was for curvature. I've never seen that as a variable.
Well, I'm not going to pull up that spreadsheet because it doesn't seem to be here. So I don't know where it is. The curvature is something about, if you go watch the Ag Open GPS stuff and watch their tractor drive around, you'll see as it drives, it puts out this this big arc out in front of it as it drives, and that represents the curvature. That has to do with as you turn, say turn left, that represents whatever arc you're driving in, whatever the center point of that is. So you got some imaginary point out here off to the left somewhere, and it's just telling you what's the arc or where you're going to drive. That's basically defining your path that you're going to drive on. And I see Kyler's really into that curvature. He does everything in curvature, and that isn't what I was trying to do right now. I did notice in the one code that I was showing before that they were saying you do, I think it's velocity over rotational velocity gives you radius, and then it turns out they're calling it radius, and on then apparently out in the real world they call it curvature. So apparently the curvature and radius are interchangeable at that point.
Got it.
Or when the guy called it radius, maybe it's really not radius, maybe it's something else. But I think when I went through it, that is what that comes out to be. And then Kyler posted that thing. He posted that thing saying, "Oh, here's." He keeps saying it's if you have an IMU, it's real easy. You just use this code and do it in 10 seconds. And the code he posted doesn't seem to have anything to do with IMUs. It looks like it's taken. You give it 3 XY points and it maps those to a circle, and then gives you the 1 over radius returning out of that. So I don't know. He kept saying to use your IMU, and I'm not sure how he's using an IMU to do that. But anyway, I'll give that a little more thought when I'll pound this code in and see if I can make it do anything.
Yeah, speaking of IMU, my IMU from Adafruit showed up. I haven't plugged it in or tested it yet, but the gyroscope and the magnetometer, which are two separate items that showed up. So it'll be interesting to test that out.
Also on my stuff, I went back after we discussed that at the meeting. I went back and looked at my spreadsheet again and thought, well, I could pull up old data and take a look at it. And now that I just said that, I guess I wanted to show my spreadsheet again. And so I'll make one more attempt to find it here. But anyway, when I ran this data is about a year old, but when I ran it, I had it drew that nice circle. That was the XY plot of the thing driving around in a circle. And from that, I could tell that I have a 1.5 meter diameter circle, and which gives me a radius of 0.75 meters. And then if I also look at it, I've got the velocity plotted and I got the heading plotted. And I thought, well, I should be able to go back and look at that. And while it's driving in a circle, it tells me what the velocity is. And then there's another thing that I didn't have plotted, which is the rotational velocity. So theoretically, I can take the rotational velocity from that and the heading while it's driving in the circle and run those numbers through and get those, see if they match or not. Because I've never verified my rotational velocity on my ODOM message to see if that's correct or not. But it seems like it should be. You know what I'm doing. I think there's not too many ways I can interpret that. So I've never verified that's correct, but that'll be something else I can look at and try to figure that out. And then when I pulled up that spreadsheet, I didn't put any headings on any of that stuff. So I've got like 20 or 30 different columns of stuff that I have no idea what they are. But I went back and looked at my code. So there's a print statement that says print out ODOM W, and then it's got X offset, Y offset, heading offset, and then it says, I think it said, it lists them as the 5 values you get from odometry. So it's X, Y, theta, and it's got forward velocity, rotational velocity. And then I had another field that says, here's basically my delta speed per servo tick. And I noticed a couple of those columns are swapped there, but clear at the end, it said print out the speed value. And I go look at it, and that's not, so the data in the spreadsheet did not match whatever my print statement says now. So I don't think I've got the steering data in that, which wouldn't have been calibrated anyway, so it probably wouldn't do me a whole lot of good. But I can go back and do things like from a ROS command line, say, do a command velocity of forward velocity this and rotational velocity this. And if I run it through that little converter that node that the TEB planner has that converts rotational velocity to angle, I should be able to run that all the way through. And then theoretically, when it comes back out of the odometry, it'll say what's the actual rotational velocity. So by comparing those two together, maybe that's a way to calibrate that too. So I know that I've got the right angle on the steering to make that work. So all the stuff's related back and forth. So it's just a matter of picking out what you want to know and then work through the equation and say, here's what the number should be, and then see if that comes out or not. So it could even be it could even be that I don't need to know anything else. You know, I don't have to compare it to an IMU or my odometry or anything else. If I put in a command velocity or a rotational velocity of say 1 radian per second, and then let the thing drive around and see what's coming out of the odometry. If those two don't match, I could probably just use that to calibrate run the scale factor up and down until those two match. Maybe that's all I got to do. I don't have to compare it to all this other stuff. But that's just a thought.
Your comments though trigger when I'll go back to share my screen. My particular GPS is constantly putting out, position, and even though it just changes a little bit, where's the share button on this web interface? There it is. So, this is my driveway, and I want to go out this way. Even while it's sitting still, my GPS is putting out a message, and it's moving ever so slightly, as it would. um, which means there is a heading actually being produced. I I don't have any sort of filter on mine to say, hey, unless you're moving, have a fixed heading. I was just going to check. This is GPS ODOM. I don't recall, Matt. This is on your just. Seems to me you showed something at one time with some sort of fixed heading. Trying to remember where I saw that. Because effectively, I'm going to have to say, hey, if I'm not moving, sort of disregard the heading from the GPS, even though it's because it's going to be spitting out a heading, but it's not going to be valid because it's not really any movement. So I guess what would be helpful is some sort of MUX where you're fusing multiple heading data, pieces of data, but I don't know. Matt, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Um, so it just depends on what GPS you use, but some of them, if you're not moving, will throw out nans, and that's basically there's a check in there for nans, and then if that happens, then it uses the last known good heading. But you're right in the sense that if you're going to start fusing multiple headings together, then you need some cases to switch between those.
The last known good heading comment, though, where is, um, double click on that sentence, where is that logic at?
If
Is
you
that up in the SwiftNav
go
firmware,
ahead,
or is that somewhere else?
maybe easier if you pull up that GPS odom.py node that you had.
Trying to find the share button again.
And just an observation, how do you get your Zoom screen to show up when you share screen like that? I can never make it do that. When you first started it, there was a picture of Matt on there, so I assume it's your Zoom screen is showing that. And anytime I do it, I can't get the Zoom screen to show up when I'm doing a share screen. Are you just saying share screen number one, and then that Zoom happens to be on that? Is that how that works?
I'm using the only way I could get Zoom working on my Ubuntu machine, I never could get the client to load correctly. And so I'm using the web interface to Zoom. And so this, to get to the share button, I have to go back to the web tab, and that's why you're getting that. So if you're using the client, I'm using a different interface than the Zoom client.
Okay.
So then I have to go back to the Chrome and then pull up the tab that I really want to share. So this is the GPS underscore ODOM. Matt, you're saying there's something in here about last good position or last good heading?
Is there a way to make that a little bit bigger?
How about now?
Yep, that's a little bit more readable.
So the word last shows up 4 times on this page.
Do we know if this is updated to whatever the latest stuff Matt's running? Maybe he's got some other stuff that isn't shown here. Well, there's an else statement right up at the top there. What does it say otherwise? It's doing one thing or the other. So what's happening above there? Before line 33. Right there it says if math is nan, then do something. That must be what he's talking about. The other thing you could do
Yeah, when
is
I saw that,
if velocity is showing up somewhere, I don't know if you're getting velocity into this, but you could just check the velocity and say if it's less than say 1/10 of a meter per second, then don't update the heading. So when you stop, it'll hold whatever was there, and when you start moving again, it starts updating the heading. Would be another way to do it, but that requires that you get velocity into this somehow, and I don't know if any of those messages come in and have velocity on them.
yeah, I think I'm going to have to subscribe to, my speed that's coming out of the wheel encoder and put some logic in here about disregard the heading from this unless the speed is over some minimal amount. But that's just my sort of blunt force approach.
Or you could
How
create
would you know if you're,
you could create yet another node that says subscribe to the heading coming out of this and subscribe to your speed, and then just have a separate node that's going to do that check. So it's going to update and give you either the current heading or the latched heading. On that, where it's subscribing to the heading message, does the heading have anything other than just the heading? Does it also have speed built into that?
This,
Yeah, there's a topic called heading. What is in that topic?
well, so I believe given that it's this particular type, I believe that's the heading that is being
Right.
produced.
Well, that's your ODOM message there, isn't it? Not the heading message.
Yes. But if I go back and,
Isn't there a command you can type in? You can say ROS topic info and then say heading. Won't that tell you what the structure of that message is?
yeah,
I guess, Jeff, that's a good point. If you wanted speed and heading, you could make a twist message.
so that's what the heading message looks like. Say that again, Matt?
Well, Jeff was wanting to know what the speed was, and right now heading is just quaternion. But if you wanted speed, you could make a twist message, and that would be speed and orientation. Or
Yeah, I publish, speed. It's not out of the ODOM message, but I publish a speed message. But it would probably be good to get the ODOM version of that as well. Compare the two.
Down at the bottom, you have a VEL message, VEL. What is that?
that's velocity coming from the GPS.
So if that's velocity from the GPS, that's probably what you want. That's one way to do it.
Or pose, not a twist message, sorry. That one's a twist message. We would need to publish from the GPS I don't know. Does it make sense to include the odometry message just right in the GPS driver instead of having a separate node?
You mean in the Navset driver?
Yeah.
I guess I don't, you're probably smarter about it than I am. I was thinking you were trying to leverage the Navset driver that was published by, the Ross guys.
Yep.
I mean, so again, my problem statement is I've got to get heading correct. I've got two problems. One is I've got to get my heading correct so that when I, drive, the heading is actually being updated. The other thing that I have to worry about is because I think your SwiftNav must filter out, no movement heading messages or something. My GPS is just blasting it out. And even though it's moving, ideally with RTK just a few centimeters, it's still giving me different positions, which is going to trigger a heading, and it's not non. So I've got to somehow filter out, read the speed, and have a filter out no movement heading and use the last best heading, and that doesn't appear to be here yet. So I mean, clearly you're capturing non-data, but
You don't have any.
my GPS status is 4 pretty much, unless I'm in the garage. I'm getting a 4 on my status. This is where you guys say, oh yeah, I've got something in my files that I've used countless times and it's all rock solid here. Ferris? Anyone?
Well, it's like
Anyway.
Jeff is saying, you have to subscribe to the velocity message or your wheel encoder message and then set a flag based on that.
That be the path, I guess. First, I got to get heading fixed. Well, I should do both at the same time, I guess. Jeff, we got on that because you triggered some thoughts around heading. Anything else going on in your world?
Back to what we were just talking about, does the existing Navset driver you're using, does that have any concept of velocity coming into that? Do any of the messages coming from a GPS represent velocity on those messages?
Yeah, that /vel is the velocity from the GPS.
Well, I thought we just looked at that velocity. It wasn't actually velocity. It looked like a position. Or is that a vector of velocity? Is that what that was?
Yes, vector of velocity.
Because
we can't.
It seems like something come from the GPS. It will just hand you a velocity. You should be able to use it directly. And I don't know if those messages are turned on from the GPS and whether or not there's anything in the Navset driver that will grab that message and strip off the velocity for you.
So if you look at Al's bag file in that Navsat driver, it's publishing speed, velocity, heading, and fixed. So all of those are being published.
So if we go back to Al's screen, and can you show us what speed looks like? Is there a topic called speed?
Yeah.
Well, I published a speed. You mean coming out of the Navsat driver or coming out of my wheel encoder?
Coming out of the Navsat driver. Is there one called speed? There
is
Is that your message or is
there
that the,
Say what?
is that speed, is that your message or is that the one out of the Navsat driver?
Navsat driver.
So try to echo that and see if that shows up as an actual speed. So there is something coming out of that. I don't know, is your tractor moving right now?
Bear with me. Not yet.
So if this is indeed the speed that's coming out of the Navsat driver, you could modify your Navsat driver and write in there, just simply say, if speed or velocity is below a certain point, don't do anything. And if it's above a certain point, just write it into whatever I forgot what information we're looking for here, the heading. So if there's heading data in the Navsat driver, that would be one place you could do it because you already got this information. Or again, you could write a separate node, or either write a separate node that subscribes to speed and to whatever heading you were getting, and then let that do the, limit it for you. Or in that node that Matt had, that was the what called GPS ODOM, and there you could also subscribe to speed, and they just do it right there. So right there, what the code says, if NAN don't do something, we just have another thing that says if speed is less than some arbitrary small amount. I see you got a half a meter per second now. Now went back to close to zero again.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely moving when I, moved the tractor probably by hand. I mean, the speed did bump up.
So anyway, that's the speed coming from the GPS itself, so that it knows whether or not, that probably is the number. It's probably more closely related than taking the speed off your wheels. And it's already there, it's already being published, so you can get to it either in the Navsat driver or in that GPS ODOM. You could subscribe to it and get it there. And I don't know if it's, if there's going to be much difference between your wheel speed and the GPS speed. That's something you could look at while you're playing with this stuff, just see how close those come out. And if it makes a
Yeah,
difference
as
or
I
not.
sit here, I forget where that speed is actually coming from. Matt, you think that's coming out of the Navsat driver?
The topic speed is coming from the Navsat driver.
What's the command that tells you, you can say like ROS topic something and then tell it the name, or maybe I say ROS node and then give the name of the node, and it tells you what it subscribes to, what it publishes, I think. So maybe it's ROS node instead of ROS topic.
It'd be ROS topic info, and then the topic name, and that'll tell you the publisher and subscriber.
Well, I think there's one you can tell it on the node itself to tell you what the inputs and outputs are. So if you say something like, I think you say, just type ROS node, and does it give you a list of
You could
commands
do
you can
ROS
use?
node list.
So say ROS node info, and then put the name of that Navsat driver name.
You want ROS node info what?
Navsat driver, whatever that's called. It says unknown node. So the problem is in your launch file, it's not necessarily called NEMA Navset drivers. It's the whatever it was called there when you started up. So
Yeah. Looks like I'm going 1.7 meters per second.
in your
There's another-
other window, can you kill the ODOM or heading or whatever it is, and you can say print out your velocity message, so your wheel velocity message, so we can see both of them at the same time running.
Which message?
Whatever your wheel velocity is. You said you're publishing something off your wheel velocity, or somehow you're publishing.
Let's say left speed. No, that's not good. Oh, well, we just messed it.
Yeah, I was thinking that as you're typing, it looked like it was coming to a stop. But it does give you the option, though. You can use either the left wheel speed or you can use the GPS speed, either one. Because somewhere you just need to know if you're moving or not, and then decide whether to update the heading.
So fun things to work through. Anything else in your world, Jeff?
Not that I can think of. But on a related note, when I run the F9P driver, the one that's not the Navsat driver, but the other one that was the that I put out in the repository there, one of the messages coming out of that did, I think, actually latch the heading. So you wouldn't have to do this on your own. And whether or not your particular brand of GPS does that, I don't know. And I don't remember if it was a NEMA message or one of the binary messages, but somehow one of them was actually latching that for me. And the biggest problem was when I came to a stop, there was enough noise that it grabbed the wrong value. So it was sitting there off by like 90 degrees until I started moving again. So that doesn't solve all of your problems, but.
It was latching a heading for you. The F9P latches the heading if
Well,
it's not moving.
one of the messages it puts out did seem to be a latched heading, so it didn't have the garbage on it all the time. And I don't remember which message it was, and if I could find out my files from Danfoss, I might have graphs of that. But back again, if we could find videos on YouTube, I went through and was talking about all that. But I don't know. Maybe if I just search YouTube for F9P and Ross Agriculture, maybe that get me close enough, because I was showing, that's when I was using that. Oh, it's when I was using that hemisphere GPS, and I was showing the difference between the F9P and the hemisphere. And that one probably in the comments does say hemisphere, so that might be fairly easy to find that. And I was pointing out that, you know, if showing the screen that the one of them had lots of garbage in it where it come to a stop, and I said, well, this other message is a latched value. And Matt says, oh, is that something, did you do that in driver? And I said, no, I think that's just the F9P does that. And at that point, I would have told which message that was that had that on, but I don't recall now what it was. So I also don't remember if it was a NEMA message. So it's just one of the standard messages you're getting, or if it was one of the F9P binary messages.
I mean, this GGA is what Navsat is reading in. There's also this HDT.
I don't think I had HDT at the time. It might have been the RMC message. And I don't remember what's in that, but anyway, I just noticed when I was plotting this stuff out that one of them happened to already be doing that for me. But if you write it yourself, you got a little more control over it. So if it is latching garbage as it comes to a stop, you might, you know, be able to average up to that point, or, you know, look back several messages and say, okay, here's a valid heading. So you could actually validate instead of latching it in garbage like mine did that time.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to bring this up because we had a lot of lively conversation back and forth about this one. But my recollection, Matt, is we set that to false to use this RMC message
You
in the
need to
knapsack
read the
driver.
driver.
Say that again.
You just may need to read through that NavSat driver that you have pulled up to understand where that's coming from.
And that always confused me. I never figured out which way that was supposed to be done, but the bottom line is if you're reading data from your GPS, you can tell it, any message you want, and you can parse it yourself if you need to. But there is something in there about, right at the bottom it says use RMC.
Yep.
Yeah, that's out of the box, so to speak. And that's what I'm using at the moment.
And I'm not even sure the RMC
then-
message has what you're looking for. So before you go to too much trouble, you could verify if that message has whatever we were talking about. It must have been.
Well, it has what it considers to be true course.
Yeah, might have been that one, but I don't recall now. Again, if we could find that YouTube video where I was going through all this, it may or may not be obvious at that point.
Trigger, any thoughts, Matt?
I'd say read through the NavSat driver. Serial driver, NEMA serial driver node.
Okay. That's all I got
There's the
today,
flag
guys.
there.
I'm sorry?
So you have the flag. You went to the launch file and you have the flag. So then open up the NEMA serial driver Python file and search for that flag. And then you'll see how that flag is used. And it's real quick. We can go through that just so you know where to look, and then you can read it and then understand how that's being used.
Well, sure. Yeah, RMC's not, I'm not where we want to be. Yeah, this is I always found that to be interesting, how they've organized that. It's actually down in here. I thought it was. Yeah. So if true, it uses the RMC NEMA message, but we've set it to false. If false, use the GGA. Oh, it says and the VTG. VTG. Ground speed, magnetic track. Well, that's interesting. I don't think I'm publishing a VTG message out of my GPS. But it doesn't, it says it's just parsing the GGA here.
So one thing you could do is any of these messages that look like they might be worth looking at, go into your GPS receiver and turn it on so it puts those messages out and just watch it on a terminal. And you can see if the heading there is stable when you're not moving. You can see which message you want by doing that. Just looking at them there. Or if there's a convenient way to get the driver to dump out everything, I suppose you could do that too. But by just hooking a serial terminal up to your GPS and look at the messages coming out. So if it is in VTG, go find the VTG message and see if the heading there is already latched or not. And you can also look at the RMC, look at the various messages and see which one's doing what you want before, hacking the code here. And depending on the brand, they may act differently too. So that'd be another good reason to verify it before you start hacking on the code, trying to expect it to do something that maybe it just won't do anyway.
So see that right there on 282?
All that stuff, when I'd look at that, that made no sense about they'd say use this or use that. And sometimes it looks like they're using the messages anyway, and then sometimes it substitutes something else. And so none of that made any sense to me when I was looking at it.
Okay, so what that line says is if you have use RMC true, then it's going to use the lat and long from your RMC message. That's what that flag does. Like if you want to know what a flag does and you see a flag in a launch file, sometimes it's useful just to kind of look into the script and try to see how they're using that flag. And what this flag says is that if it's set to true, then it's going to use the lat long from that message. And if it's set to false, then it's going to use the GGA.
Right. And that's the question in my mind is it's referencing VTG here. We have RMC as false in the default launch file. So I'm poking around with what's the
But Jeff is right in the sense that even though we have use RMC false, what's a little bit confusing is that we do use some of the messages out of RMC. RMC also includes heading, and that's where we get our heading from. VTG also has heading, but not all GPS outputs from that. So I think the VTG is like a dual GPS or something. So, and I don't really understand why some GPSs use other
I don't think it
messages or
is.
not.
I don't think it is the dual antenna. I think it's just simply you just go turn it on and it is there. So he's just got to go back to his configuration and say, however Novotel says that, you say, turn on, however you turn on your other messages, just say turn on the VTG also, and then go watch it on a terminal, see if that looks like the data that you want.
Okay. So then you'll need to modify this again if you want to use the VTG message for heading and output a heading. So it just depends on what you want to do, but this is kind of a file that you can modify.
Um,
Maybe that flag parameter name is kind of misleading. It should say something like use lat long from RMC true or false.
yeah, so to be clear, I'm using the out of the box launch file, which has this use RMC set to false. So if I scan down through this, well, if we look for anything related to heading, I'm going to conclude publish velocity from RNC regardless since GGA doesn't provide it. Okay. Velocity is not really. If HDT is not in parsed sentence, if HDT is not in parsed sentence, so in my case,
It's not.
it's
HDT
going
is
to,
a heading.
yeah, that,
But like Jeff says, we could turn it on. The really basic messages are the GGA, obviously. That's your GPS data. And then the next one that's most common is the RMC.
if HDT is not in parsed sentence, it's not in parsed sentence.
Yeah. So do you know what GGA is? GGA.
I'm looking at the GGA sentence.
Okay. The HDT
I mean, this is the
message.
name.
So,
I'm sorry, say that again.
So in that file, it's referring to GGA message, a VTG message, an RMC message, and HDT message. So those are all just standard NEMA messages. GGA
Yeah, what I'm
is
trying to
one of
understand.
them.
Right, these are the sentences, right? So I got that. I'm looking at GGA and I'm trying to figure out
So
what is
here's
it?
the confusing part, Al. In that software, it said if HDT is not present, and then you come over here and then you look at the GGA message. It's just like, are
And
you
what I'm
look?
trying to figure out is where in this sentence structured is it thinking it's going to find HDT?
That's a fallacy. You can spend a lot of time looking down that road.
In the thing you just displayed, look for $GP HDT. It's a different message.
Yep, exactly, Jeff. It's funny, man. It's funny if you go down the wrong road, you can spend a heck of a long time looking for something.
I mean, I get it that there's HDT. So
Back to your Python code, it says if HDT is in parsed sentence. Well, parsed sentence is just simply the message you just pulled in. So it's saying, was that an HDT message, or was it a GPGGA message, or was it the RMC message? So it's just saying which type of message do we just receive. If it wasn't an HDT, then we're going to do this. If it wasn't HDT, I guess we're going to do something else.
but to get heading, do you have to publish, and I shouldn't use the word publish, does the GPS have to output an HDT $GP HDT message?
If you want to process that message, yes, you have to make sure it's turned on in your GPS unit, so it's outputting that.
Yeah, so I think that's my problem, is the messages that I'm publishing are not
And just putting that message out doesn't mean it's going to fix this. You know, it's whoever wrote this driver did it in a certain way, and they may not have been looking for a heading from the heading message or whatever. So kind of like saying about use RMC, it's going to pick and choose different messages. So number one, go into your GPS, make sure that's turned on so you're outputting it, and then look at the fields and see if they're doing what you want. If not, there's no sense going down this path, because if it's not giving you the right stuff, you know, there's no sense hacking on code.
Yeah, I think when I moved over to the Navset driver basic, I stopped publishing the NEMA sentence, the raw NEMA sentence that was output. Yeah, I don't, if I go back to my steps, I don't think I actually published an HD sentence, HDT sentence. So if that's a requirement, I'm not meeting that requirement. Yeah. RMC, GGA, GSA, RMC, GGA, GSA, RMC, GGA, GSA.
That's all you need.
There's no HDT.
And depending what rate it puts those out, they may not, just looking at this, it may not show up, but probably it puts those out once a second, and most of their stuff comes out once a second. Or maybe even putting out 10 times a second. I don't know how fast you're running this stuff.
Yeah, my messages are all coming out at 10 hertz.
Well, somewhere in your setup here, it says, here's the Novotel message to turn on this output type. If you find that, you know, that's going to tell you whether you turn that on or not, or at least in your documentation, it'll tell you how to turn it on. So once you find that chunk, that'll tell you it, because you have a Novotel message. It says something about message on time 1, and it's going to put the, like, say GP GGA. Well, you just need to add one that says also HDT in there to turn that one on.
So what you're displaying there is all you need. You need GGA and RMC. That's the basic.
I'm sorry, say that again.
standard one.
Unless he wants
shoot.
the VTG and HD, whatever it is, those other two messages.
It's hard to explain, I guess, but in the NEMA standard, they publish the same message on multiple. They publish the same data on multiple messages. It's the same data on multiple messages.
Yes, but
Well, and that's not
on my
terribly hard
stuff, one place was latched, one place was not latched. So it's the same data, but one is latched and one is not. So that's why I'm saying, go back to your GPS, turn these messages on, look at them in terminal, and see if one of the headings is latched. And if it is, then that's the one you have to implement.
That's great. That's a good distinction.
Yeah, I mean, that's not hard to understand. What is evidently a fact that I missed somewhere along the way is this driver is expecting an HDT message. I'm simply not, I didn't program my GPS to output an HDT message.
That's one way to look at it.
Well,
This
is there any
driver-
other?
This driver is expecting a GGA message and an RMC. That's the basic, that's the most basic message from GPSs. And most of the GPSs, even the low cost GPSs, will output two things. They'll output a GGA and an RMC. The more expensive GPSs get into advanced features and filtering like Jeff is talking about. But this is a very basic simple, easiest case.
Well, then I'm misunderstanding, because are you saying if I don't put out an HTT message, this driver should still work?
I'm saying that this is a very basic driver, and all you need from your GPS is a GGA message and an RMC message. And with those two NEMA messages, you can get position, velocity, heading. Your RMC message gives you velocity and course over ground. And that's where we get heading from. True course.
So I'm trying to find in this driver where it's getting heading from.
Well, Jeff brought up a really good point, and I've never had a GPS that had that latching function, or not personally. So I've just used those two basic messages.
If I cycle through the word heading in this driver.py, I only see it referenced
23 times.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to see where it's pulling heading off of the GGA sentence, because I'm not seeing it.
Well, that's incorrect. The GA does not have heading. So you can go back and look at the standard for a GGA message and see what data is packed into that message.
No,
it's a little confusing.
yeah, I mean, there's no, that's easy. It's right here. Here's the stuff in the GGA message. What I'm saying
no
is,
heading.
I'm looking at this
There's
code.
no heading in that message. So again, if you're looking
there's
in this
course.
code for take some time, understand
You're right,
what
there's
is
not.
in the GGA message. Then take some time and understand what is in the RMC message.
Yeah, it's right here, Matthew.
Yep.
True course, right there.
Yep. So now imagine. So you got speed and knots and you have true course in this message. And in the other message, you have your lat and long. So imagine all we're doing is taking those two messages and sticking them together. That's it. There's nothing fancy. Just try to think as basic as you possibly can. Just keep it simple. There's plenty of room for complexity. Robots are insanely complex. So
yeah,
for
my
example,
problem
if you're
statement is not
for
about
heading,
complexity. I really had a simple problem statement. Heading doesn't appear to be working.
okay.
And that's, and we've got our MC set to false. So I'm like, okay. Wonder where it's even attempting to get heading from in this if you've set RMC to false.
So we look at 282 again. We try to understand what that flag does. And if you look at line 282, if RMC is set to false, then it gets lat and long from your GGA message. If it's set to true, then it gets your lat and long from the RMC message. That's
yeah,
it.
lat and long is not the one on the
Simple.
table, it's the heading.
That's right. So regardless of whether you set the RMC to true or if you set the RMC to false, it always gets your speed and heading from RMC. That's the message that contains that information. Now, there are other messages in this NEMA standard that contain heading. VTG contains heading. HDT contains heading. But in this case, All we're doing is looking at the RMC message.
I'm just not seeing in this code where it's pulling heading from the RMC.
Okay, so then you just keep scrolling down. You can, oh, actually right up above here. If, else if, parse sentence, okay, maybe we scroll down a little bit. So we have it set to false, so we're not getting the Latin log from RMC. So we scroll down. Okay, so now here we're getting into some fun stuff. It says publish velocity from RMC regardless, since GGA doesn't provide it. GGA is just your Latin long. Your RMC has speed and heading. So now we take a look at this very first message. Self velocity publish, current velocity. So when we went back in your ROS bag and you did ROS topic echo /vel, VEL, that is exactly where that message is being published. Line 322 is where /vel is being published. And then if you take a look at line 324, that is the speed message that we looked at. ROS topic echo /speed. Line 324 is where that is being published. Now we scroll down a little bit more. So that covers, so we understand right now where fix is coming from. Fix is coming from your GGA up above. We just found out where velocity is coming from, line 322. And we just figured out where speed is coming from, line 324. So we're going to scroll down a little bit more and try to find where heading is being published. Okay, look at 335. 335 is where heading is being published. So
Because it says it's not in the parse sentence.
Right. So it takes the true course that's coming in the RMC message and it's publishing it on line 325. So that's where your velocity, speed, and heading comes from, right there. And that's all it is.
So riddle me this, Batman. This 280, this, okay, it doesn't have a, we only get into this code if use RMC flag is set, right?
It says only publish fixed from RMC if the flag is set to true. So you're right.
No, but
don't get
is.
That's right. We're not using that. So select from there and go down and see where it ends. Right there is where it ends. Publish
so if I get
velocity.
a valid, fix is valid, and HDT is not in the sentence.
That's all it is. Very simple. Like, that's pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I could say use RMC fixed position as the, we could change the name of that variable to make it more explanatory, but
I think I neglected to process the fact that it says if it's HDT is not in the parse sentence. So it's everything else but HDT.
Velocity, speed, and heading.
Is that else if? Else if RMC is in the parse sentence. And that goes down to there.
So down below it says something about if HDT is in message, then they do something. So if you scroll down,
Where do you want me to go?
well, it's hard to tell with you bouncing up and down, but I think it was, yeah, the thing it said if HDT is not in the message, if you go down from there about a page,
Is that what you're looking for?
okay, now go down from there about a page and it'll say if HDT is in message, right, kind of, you just have right there.
Yeah, that's
If
what,
it is
what
in
it-
there, then they do something, they get the heading apparently from the HDT message. I assume is what they're doing.
yeah, so what we've clarified is I'm gonna put a info statement in here that gives me the human readable heading before it converts it to quaternion.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So one thing I thought is right there. It would probably make it easier if we did like slash heading and then slash like degree. One of them would be degrees, one of them would be radians, and then one of them would be quaternions. And then you can use whatever you want from that heading message. Or that's more of a question. Do you think that would be a good addition there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to highlight the fact that once it's converted to a quaternion, it's not really human readable.
So we could publish 3 items under heading: degrees, radians, and quaternions.
It certainly makes it much easier to debug. If nothing else, you can just go look at it and say, well, what is the angle? It would just be there. You can go look at it, whether you end up using it for anything or not.
Okay, yeah, it's there. Okay, I can make those changes. And then the other thing, like Jeff was saying, should we publish velocity, and should we publish like an odometry message out of this right here? I mean, because like we could build the whole odometry message and then just publish that as well. And then you could pick and choose. So for example, instead of listening or subscribing to the velocity and subscribing to the heading, we could just publish everything together. And then you could, in your callback, you can choose to use whatever you want. I don't know. Whatever to make it easier.
I mean, my input to that would be set the minimum requirement. If the minimum requirement is a GGA sentence and an RMC sentence, cool. Take all this logic out about other types of sentences. But again, that's going down to a tailored driver. But from a readability standpoint, saying, hey, our approach is all you're going to do is give me a GGA and an RMC, and then I'm going to be good. I think it would be great to put the ODOM embedded in this, but I would take all this stuff, other stuff out, because it's complexity it's complexity. But that's just opinion of one, not a professional coder.
And then
I mean, the
somebody
other
would always
thing
have the option to use the more advanced drivers like Jeff's driver, or to use this full driver if we just made a real simple one.
So that was helpful. Thank you for taking me through that. I'm going to put some info sentences in there to try to get a human readable heading so I can see why I'm not, whether or not the heading is actually being what I think it is.
Piece of cake.
I'm sorry?
Piece of cake.
Yeah, right. Mm. Any more? Last call.
Well, I just went out I did both a search on YouTube and I did a search on Slack, and I can't find any reference to that stuff I was talking about. Stuff keeps falling off the back on Slack, and then stuff on YouTube. If it wasn't specifically put in a comment, you can't search for it. So I searched for Hemisphere, and it says nothing. And I searched for F9P. There's lots of stuff with comments to that, but I have no idea how to go find that stuff. Actually, if I could find the original files, that gives me a date, and then I can go out and look on the, go to the YouTube and look for the, what do you call that? Well, basically we say show all the videos. I can find it by date that way and get close to where I want to be. But now I got to go find my old hard drive that I backed up stuff from Danfoss to try to find any of that stuff. So if I wanted to get reference to that, again, I'm just pointing out it's real hard to find anything, and I don't know what the answer to that is.
You feel like going back and listening to all the recorded videos and then indexing them, or putting like a table of content?
That has occurred to me, but there's like 300 videos out there now or something. There's just a massive amount. And at one point I was thinking about, they have that thing, it'll like create a closed caption or something. But I tried playing with that one time, and it hacks up the text so bad that I don't know if that would pull up the important stuff or not. But and then still you'd have this massive text of the entire thing. I don't know how you would, you know, sort through that and then decide what's in there. So, but that would be handy if somebody wants to watch every video and note down everything that was discussed, and then put like a synopsis of what happened. But it used to be on Slack, you could go back and say, you know, search for a community meeting, and it would say every time it was posted, it says, here's the comments that were posted. But I think they've all fallen off the back end now, so I don't think those are there anymore. So I don't have an answer to that, but let's see if I can pull up those, find the original Excel files, plots that I had, that'll give me a range to find out where it was. And since everything's on multiple computers, I don't know which computer to look on either, because I pulled the stuff. I think I had the mini tractor directory. I pulled it onto one of my computers. Apparently it's not this one I'm using right now. So I've got massive amounts of data, have no idea where anything is, and nothing's indexed. So that becomes a problem.
I think that's normal.
My computer had a Danfoss, I had it set up so every time I do a download, it would automatically save it to my download directory. So I've got like 5,000 files in my download directory. And the computers I got, the one I got set now, if I say download something, it just shows it on the screen or whatever, and you have to manually, if you want to, you have to click the button and say download it, and it'll save it to your download folder. So it's good and bad depending on how you look at it. If you save everything, then you get this massive amount of data, and again, then you have to go figure out what it is, because a lot of it'll save a PDF that'll call QRZ39568, and there's no reference to what it actually is. So you got 1,000 of those files that you can't tell what they are anyway unless you open them up and look at them. So I'm just complaining now. I'm just telling you about my pathetic state of life right now.
Okay, gentlemen. Good luck in your endeavors.
Thank you. You too.
Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Goodbye.